Yeah, I did change, and I'm really glad I changed.
This one's wife. Watch out. Here come the Sue-Sexes. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Narcissists can be litigious creatures. This is because the use of the law and litigation will be used for the purposes of the pursuit of the prime aims, and also because of the attitude of the narcissist can often find themselves as a party to litigation. By way of example, the narcissist functions with a sense of entitlement, a lack of accountability, a failure to adhere to regulations, laws, conventions, because adherence is a shackle on the narcissist. It amounts to a threat to control. Certain narcissists will behave in a law-abiding fashion much of the time, maybe all of the time, because their narcissism recognizes that there is a greater threat to control posed by the failure to adhere to the law than in not adhering to it. For instance, the prospect of going to prison would impact upon the need for control to a much greater state than adhering to the law, and also could have consequences with regard to the facade management. However, there are plenty of narcissists that won't abide to their obligations, be it in a criminal sense, be it in a civil sense, and find themselves involved in the court process. The most obvious one is where the narcissist engages in criminal activity. For instance, stealing something, destroying property of somebody else, assaulting an individual, engaging in stalking, which then results in criminal charges being brought against them. Naturally, they will, at least to begin with, issue a denial, because that's the first defense, the first line of defense of the twin lines of the narcissistic defense. It wasn't me, I didn't do it. But this litigiousness goes beyond the criminal arena. It will cover, for instance, failing to pay rent, failing to pay for goods that have been ordered, not upholding one end of a contractual obligation, defaming somebody, trespassing in a civil capacity, not adhering to maintenance payments, failing to adhere to child custody arrangements, not keeping a property in good repair, a failure to control an animal. There'll be lots of different ways that a narcissist will do things or fail to do things, which means that somebody else has to take legal action against them. And that taking of legal action against them then results in a threat to control. Thus, the narcissist will deny that they've done anything wrong. They will blame shift, suggesting that the person has brought the legal action is doing so in a purely vexatious fashion, that they are seeking to bully them through the use of the law. They'll dole out pity plays. They'll claim that the facts are not as has been represented. They'll seek to adjourn hearings. They'll seek continuances. They'll seek to delay the provision of information, and so on and so forth. Watch my video about how the narcissist uses delay against you. And thus, where you had to take action against a narcissist in order to stand on your rights, to compel the narcissist to do something that they ought to have done, or to restrain the narcissist from doing something, you will find that the narcissist will invariably twist and turn and protract that litigation. That's where the narcissist is a defendant or a respondent. In other instances, the narcissist is the instigator of legal action. The narcissist will do so in order to pursue the prime aims. The instigation of legal proceedings against somebody, either the threat of doing so or actually commencing proceedings, is done to pursue the prime aims, to assert control over the other person or persons, to generate fuel by way of people's responses, and to obtain a residual benefit. This might be, at its simplest, suing somebody for money. Accordingly, certain narcissists will regularly enter into the threat of and commencement of legal proceedings because that is an effective way to achieve the prime aims. In some instances, these individuals are vexatious litigants. Their claims are baseless, but they've got plenty of time on their hands and a rudimentary understanding of legal process, so that they become a thorn in the side of various organisations, companies and individuals by repeatedly bringing lawsuits. In other instances, it is the preserve of the wealthy. Able to hire expensive lawyers, they bully people through lawfare for the purposes of getting to those prime aims. Accordingly, you can understand how the use of the law is particularly attractive and likely to involve the narcissist, be it from a failure to undertake obligations and thus ending up being sued, or using the law to sue other people. And that is where we find this one's wife and Harry. We know hitherto that the pair of them have been quite litigious in relation to Harry's involvement in the hacking cases, to this one's wife's case against Associated Newspapers surrounding the letter that was provided to her father, that there have been various threats issued towards people with regard to the compulsion of obligations and so forth. And the gruesome twosome have not shied away from throwing their weight around. For this one's wife, this is, of course, in the pursuit of the prime aims. Somebody does something that she doesn't like, for instance, criticises her, then that is a threat to control, and there's the possibility that she will take legal action against that individual or organisation to shut them up. It would appear that their track record for being litigious is being extended, and there is a suggestion that there is, on the horizon, further legal action being undertaken by them. This comes from a tweet from Queer Lips of Truth, which has been picked up also by Feisty Energy, a contributor on the subreddit Saint This One's Wife. They use a full name, I do not. As always, you can make your own minds up as to the veracity of this information. I'm simply placing it within the context of, might this be something that a narcissist would do? Is it something that is commensurate with the behaviour of this one's wife? The suggestion is, Prince Harry and this one's wife are coming for the US press for what they call an unfair and false presentation of them. Queer Lips of Truth's informant states they are frustrated and feel like everything they do is reported with a bit of slight. What broke the proverbial camel's back was in part the issue with the Archwell deficiency, the jams, and recently the Pat Tillman Award. Pausing there, accordingly, the Archwell deficiency, the shenanigans around the jams and the Pat Tillman Award controversy, of course, are all threats to control. And the reporting of those various instances, which has been critical, and quite correctly so, of this one's wife and Harry, threatens this one's wife's need for control. And Harry, of course, demonstrating his usual arrogance, goes along with what this one's wife requires, so that the pair of them are in high dudgeon about fair reporting, but remember, in their world, it's unfair. For this one's wife, the presentation of them, quite accurately, is not accurate as she sees it, because she sees it through that warping, distorting lens of that field of control. Queer Lips of Truth continues by stating twice they've reached out for legal counsel on how to proceed against some US reporters, bloggers, and news outlets. If that is accurate, that is troublesome indeed. Once again, there have been numerous suggestions that this one's wife and Harry are seeking to clamp down on people's ability to express valid opinions about them, that they are in effect attacking free speech. Naturally, the narcissist demonstrates their hypocrisy. They do so by always being allowed in their world to say what they want. But then you are not allowed to say what you want if it criticises the narcissist. And the simplest way of rejecting such a criticism is to ensure that people can't say them. and thus to limit the ability of individuals to criticise the Sussexes. Accordingly, they would look at any opportunity, whether it be through the adjustments of the way that social media works, and in particular through the use of litigation, to shut people up. And note, the suggestion that comes from Queer Lips of Truth is that they will be targeting US reporters, news outlets, and bloggers. Might that mean that individuals who express their validly held beliefs on YouTube will start finding themselves the subject of litigation? Well, they would certainly be kept busy because there's plenty of people that comment about them. Now, legitimate observations about them, an expression of free speech, those individuals that stick to valid analyses based upon actual evidence have nothing to fear. There are, of course, certain YouTube channels that spout absolute nonsense and lies about the Sussexes, and they may well find themselves targeted. We'll have to see. Queer Lips of Truth continues by explaining there is a sense of real frustration, particularly surrounding the Invictus Games. Harry thinks that's the only positively good thing that he's got left, and the press is refusing to highlight the work while bashing him constantly. Well, this is the Mardy-arsed attitude of Prince Harry all over, isn't it? Failing to recognise that if he'd had just got on with the Invictus Games and not allowed his wife to try and take it over, that he hadn't allowed it to be used as a vehicle for her own personal promotion, then people would still recognise the value of the Invictus Games and would not comment adversely about it. But because he has allowed her polluting influence into it, people have legitimately commented about that, and this has resulted in him getting a fair bashing. Of course, old dimwit isn't able to recognise that, hence he bleats and complains about it. Queer Lips of Truth observed, well, at least they are not blaming the British tabloid press this time around. But the informant explains Harry continues to do so. He thinks the British tabloid influence also captures certain segments of the United States press. The catastrophic car chase backlash, for example, he thought that this was Rupert Murdoch's influence on the New York Post and other media outlets, and made this even worse. Queer Lips of Truth responded to the informant by suggesting, well, at least the royal family cannot be blamed this time around. The informant responded to that by saying, there is something that tells me that he wants to go back. Not to work or anything, but just to be in the security of the palace walls. Some days he gives a defeated vibe, but like someone carrying on just because of his children. You can tell he misses the old life, a lot. That wouldn't be a surprise that if Harry is hankering for the security of the institution that protected him so effectively. But the suggestion here is that the gruesome twosome have become increasingly fed up of criticism because it's been growing in the United States. There's criticism of them regularly in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in Canada, in other places. But they thought that the United States would essentially be a sanctuary for them, a safe haven, where they would be welcomed by similarly minded individuals, that they could make a fortune and be lauded as this sort of celebrity royal combo, and all would be rosy. They didn't reckon with the fact that the US would turn against them. They didn't reckon with those that are disinterested in them then starting to move across into the area of we don't like them. They thought it would all be hunky-dory. The fact is, as I've outlined previously, this has originated as a consequence of their own behaviours, something the gruesome twosome are incapable of accepting, certainly this one's wife, because her narcissism prevents her from doing so. Thus, it demonstrates again their mindset. Rather than recognise, why is it we're being criticised so often? It's because of what we do. Let's change our ways, or let's just withdraw from public life, keep our heads down, get on with things without getting in people's faces. That won't happen. Harry lacks a critical faculty to work that out. This one's wife is completely unable to see it. Her narcissism won't allow her to recognise that she is the problem. It's everybody else. And what is the result? This suggestion from queer lips of truth that they're going to go on the war path or the law path by coming after US reporters, bloggers and news outlets. Such saber-rattling, if accurate, is only going to blow up in their faces. The reason being, dependent on who they select as their targets, they may well fail in such legal actions, and even where they succeed, it will essentially be seen not as a legitimate act to go after those individuals, but be seen once again as their crusade against the freedom of speech. And in such circumstances, that means that even more people will turn against them. Once again, as I tell you so often, that with a mid-range narcissist as this one's wife, the more that she tries to cure the problem, the more she creates new ones. Give her enough rope, and she'll end up hanging herself. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.